And I just want to say, like, nobody's, no one's passion is like too big or too small, and we all have different passions. And not every passion is necessarily, maybe a money-making activity. It's just something that you really love to do, because when you're really and truly doing something you're passionate about, you're so busy thinking about what's possible that you don't think about things that you can't do.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Ecom Life. I'm so thrilled today to have Amy McLaren on our podcast today. Amy's a mom of two who balances her time between leading Lady Strength, a growing online community of driven entrepreneurial women, growing an Airbnb business, and being a hands-on CEO of Village Impact, the charity that she and her husband founded more than a decade ago. So Amy, welcome to the podcast. Did I hit out all the points?
Yeah, you did. I'm a multi-passionate entrepreneur. Sure.
I just can't believe how much you do. Yeah, you bet. I just can't believe how much you do, and we'll get into that a little bit on how you balance that. But of course, obviously, we're starting to work with a Village Impact here at Quadra, and we're just so touched by the work that you guys are doing there. I was just curious if you could kind of give us some background on how you got started with Village Impact and just give us a little background on that.
Yeah, for sure. So for those of you listening, Village Impact is a Canadian charity that my husband have founded, which seems like yesterday, but it is over a decade ago. And we help by building schools in rural areas of Kenya. And we do that by partnering with the government. So our schools are sustainable, and the fact that if we were to leave today, those schools would still be thriving, still have thousands of kids that go through them. But it didn't start all like that with 15 schools and thousands of kids. A decade ago, we started the charity, and it was really we're sitting in our living room and we were watching Oprah's Big Give. And if anyone, I don't know if you ever watched that.
Yeah, I do.
I know. We used to sit there and watch it and see Oprah go into these communities and like work with the communities and help them and do all amazing, wonderful things. And I would sit there and I'd watch it, and I would always cry and Stu would cry. And then I'm like, I really want to do that. Like, I want to do that, but I want to go internationally, because one of my biggest passions is travel. And so I'll never forget, my husband's like, that's great, Amy, but you're teaching, and how is this going to work? And I said, you're like more of the business guy. I'm like, how about you raise the money? I'm good at organizing details. I will find us where we'll go, and we'll find a community that we can help and work with and learn from. And he's like, okay. And we argue about this all the time, because I think that conversation was in November, but he will tell you it was like the second week of December. Anyway, so he's like, well, when do you want to do it? And I said Christmas, because when I was teaching at the time, I only had 2 weeks at Christmas off, right? Mm-hmm. So it had to be Christmas, and I wasn't going to wait a year. And so he's like, okay. So we ended up raising $40,000
Wow.
through what is now a webinar, but it used to be a teleseminar back in the day.
Wow.
All this amazing technology of video and all that good stuff was all over the phone. We raised this money. We took it down to El Salvador. I found a community where we could get to know the community. We lived with a family while we were there, to build relationships and get to know them. We went to a school and went to an orphanage, and that was kind of really the start of wanting to grow a nonprofit. And on the way back from that trip, Stu was like, I get it now, because I'm always like, giving money is great, but then at the same time being there and learning from the cultures, learning from the people, helping,
Yes.
working together, create such a more meaningful impact. And so we came back from that trip, and he was like, okay, I kind of understand what you want to do. And that was kind of how it started. And then it snowballed into more projects, and then we found ourselves now, like we have in Kenya, and all of our projects are in Kenya at this time. But it started with Oprah and a trip down.
Oh my gosh. That's so amazing. I wonder if Oprah even has any notion that this amazing charity just spawned from, her gift. What is again her gift episode?
Oprah's Big Gift.
Yeah, Oprah's Big Gift. I mean, it's just so amazing. And kudos to you for taking action. I mean, I'm one of those guys that probably would have just sat and just cried about it, just like being touched about it, the gifts and whatnot. But I think this is so important. Obviously our audience is entrepreneurial. Was there a moment there where it went from just, this feels really good, I've seen Oprah doing this, to like you wanting to take out? Was there, because I feel like that's the spark that kind of ignites a journey, and I'm just curious what that was for you specifically.
I actually write about that in my book, and how it is that moment, like you're talking about, that spark, that moment of having that kind of flash of creativity or something that you want to do. You have to really take action at that time to do something, because oftentimes we sit there and then, like you said, we may let it pass by and we don't take any action. And I think where people get stuck sometimes is they think they have to all of a sudden create this big plan, when really all it is like maybe picking up the phone and making a phone call, or putting some more thought on what you're going to do with the idea, or just taking one step towards it. So for us, we really, and I mean, we still run our charity like this. When we did our fundraiser, we really leaned into what we knew as entrepreneurs and who we knew at that time that could help us with this bigger vision. So, I mean, Stu got on the phone and we called 5 of our closest friends that were entrepreneurs. And I mean, this was like 11 years ago, 12 years ago. And some of these entrepreneurs we called are still on our board today. I mean, I've never forget we've known Russell Brunson, the founder of QuickFund, for many years. And he was on one of our first fundraising calls, that call where we raised the money. And then, I mean, we were just talking earlier, I've been on Russell's stage several times with my husband where he fundraises money. So for us, it was like looking at, people we knew, what could we do together, and then using the business knowledge and skills we had at that time, which was creating some type of webinar. And then what we did was we asked those 6 entrepreneurs to share their insights for the coming year. So to share marketing tips. And then, because that's what we knew, online marketing has been in our family for a long time. So we just shared that. People paid to listen. And I think that's the thing. It's like taking action at that moment, but then thinking about what you do have right in front of you that you can use to help get you to that next step.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think a lot of people get stuck on, they'll have that idea to do the nonprofit or business, and they'll focus on the how, like, how am I going to do it? And then they get overwhelmed, right? Instead of focusing on the why. And it seems like, I'm going to guess you didn't know much about nonprofits back then.
No, I Googled it. I found a good lawyer.
Yeah.
I found a lawyer in Toronto, so Canadian. And I had this amazing conversation with him, Mark Blumberg. I actually emailed him this morning for something.
Wow.
And I said, I'm like, I want to start a charity. What do you think? Can you tell me the pros and cons of starting a charity? What are some stories you have? And it's like that old saying, right? You go to people that have done it before because it's nothing new, but then learn from that. Yeah, I mean, I Googled, I went online, I found a lawyer, I talked to a lawyer. And then, I mean, it was messy. At the beginning, we were running money we raised through our business. So we were paying taxes on the money that we raised. But you've got to start somewhere, right? It's not going to happen overnight. And for us to get charitable status here in Canada, it took me almost 2 years to get that piece of paper that officially recognizes us as a nonprofit or a charity. So.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, that's a huge lesson. I think I speak for myself when I say I get stuck a lot on the how and don't take action, but just knowing the why and diving in is the best part. I'm curious, as you're talking about El Salvador real quick, what was that moment like when you landed there and you're like, I'm actually doing this? Was there a moment when you were in El Salvador that it kind of just hit you that this is real, like I'm really doing this? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So we landed in El Salvador. We chose El Salvador for 2 reasons. The first reason was we had an entrepreneurial friend that lived in El Salvador. And so I'll never forget when we stayed with him and then we left and we had a contact from the school we were helping come and get us. And he came in this little like red car that looked like it was going to break down. And our friend was like, okay, his name's Jose. And he's like, okay, you guys take care. I'll have your number. You have my number. Please call me if there's a problem. And I could tell he was like, what are these guys doing? They're getting in this little red car with someone we don't know. And inside, I'm like so excited because that's my jam. Like I love travel and I love kind of the unknown, and that's exciting for me. For my husband, not so much. But I think that moment was one big one. And then the second for me was being in Walmart, and we obviously didn't take the money down in cash. We had it in debit. And we went into a Walmart and I think we bought close to 250 backpacks. And we like cleared out the shelves and put it in, and drove these things up to the community. And that was probably the second part of just being in that moment and taking action. And then, being in the community. And that's a huge thing for me, is connecting with the community and being community led. And I'm really proud at our organization that we work to be sustainable as much as we can. We work with our community. All of our projects and school locations come from the community. We're always looking to collaborate with other organizations, and it's just a huge part of it. And I think when we're in El Salvador, living with that family for a few days and getting to know them, it's just that extra thing that I love to do, but also I think is so important.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So you transitioned to Kenya. Why did you guys transition to Kenya?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And you know what? It's nothing crazy. And we get this question quite a bit. The only reason we went to Kenya, and I can't explain it, but Stu and I have always had this love for Africa. I didn't travel to Africa when I was a kid. I didn't in my teenage years, but we've always had this kind of heart for Africa. And so much so, I mean, our little guy is adopted from South Africa, my one son.
Oh.
And we ended up in Kenya because a volunteer organization that I had volunteered with prior had said, you need to meet with this lady, Irene, and she's in Kenya. And we're like, okay, great. That's someone that's doing good work, someone I can connect with. So we took a flight and we landed in Nairobi, and I met her in Karen, just outside of Nairobi. We had coffee and we chatted and got along very well. And she took me to some projects she was working on. And that was the start of what now is, we've known each other now for 12 years. So she's like, Irene, who I met, is the founder of VICTA, which is our partner organization in Kenya. So we work alongside her with our projects, and she helps me facilitate some of the projects that we do as well. So no crazy reason. I just have a heart for Africa, and a volunteer organization I worked with said, you've got to meet Irene. I think you would work really well with her. So knowing that, I got on a plane and I flew to Nairobi and I met her.
That's awesome. So you hadn't traveled to Africa much. What was your first impression when you got to the community there and you met some of the people you'd be serving? Do you remember your thoughts or feelings of went through your head as you kind of took it all in?
Yeah. So Irene, so Kenya was the second country. I did spend some time in Ghana too. But when we met Irene, she took us to this rural community in Kenya, and it was just after the war and the political violence that happened. And all these families were in tents, and they were displaced. They had nowhere to go. And she was sharing what had happened there. And then we'd go to another community, and it was full of like life. And even though there was nothing, there was still such a desire for, learning more and developing this sense of community. And I don't know, in a weird way, it feels like home in some sense when I go, because I'm there so much. But I just realized that, you see how far $1 can go and how much of a difference it can make. And for us, it just felt right. Like I talk to people, get to know them. And I just knew that, and my husband always says this, and I totally agree, is the more money you have, the more impact you can have. And it's like, wow, if we were to sell like one wishlist membership license, which was his wishlist member software back in the day, that could help on so many kids. And you realize just what an impact you can have when you work with a community. And so, it was just, it's so long ago, but I feel like it was a lot of love, a lot of like, feels so good, feels so right. And this community had no school, and these kids in this one community was walking, like you hear, like 10 kilometers to school, and there was nothing there. And we built this first school with the government, so they fund all the teacher salaries and the principal. And we built that school, and it just creates this hub for hope, hub for belief. And we've had other organizations come in and build little clinics by it. We have a lot of entrepreneurs come up, and we like to say, they built like a strip mall almost. Like, so beside our first school, there's like 5 or 6 stands, and there's like a hairdresser, a cafe. So you just really see that the school becomes the base for the community, and it's a place of hope. And it not only gets used for the kids and teaching and learning and school, but it also gets used by the mamas in the community. It gets used by the community elders. So it becomes like this amazing hub in the community, which is one of my
That's amazing. You know, as I was researching your charity, as we, Quadra getting involved, one of the things that really touched me as a father of 3 girls was the impact you guys are having with the women and the girls there. Was that intentional for you to kind of work more with the women? I know there's other kids that go, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on why the impact it's had on the women there in the villages that you work in.
Yeah, so our first 14 schools are co-ed schools. Our last school, and that has been in the last couple of years, is our building of a first women's high school, girls' high school.
Mm-hmm.
So we like to call it a double-decker school because it is by far the biggest project we've ever built. It's got 2 levels. It even has flushable toilets, which is, I think it's our first school that has that. But that intent to work with women, I've always had it in the back of my mind, or I've always enjoyed it, because I run women-led retreats and do all these things. But that kind of project with the girls, it came from the community, and it came from what had happened after COVID. So where we built this high school now, it's crazy, but we built it there because a lot of these girls in that area after COVID and during COVID were out in this high traffic spot selling themselves to make money for they were, it's just devastating. And their pregnancy rates within the local schools were going through the roof. Girls were out every night in this busy truck stop, selling themselves. And it's like heartbreaking. And so the community kind of led with, we could see what was happening with the stats. And they said, let's build a girls' school, because bringing all the girls' together creates a safe place for them. And they feel empowered to be together. So yes and no. Like, I love working with women. I love working with men too. But that school really came as a result of what was happening with girls, the stats and pregnancies, abuse, violence, all kinds of things against women. So this school now provides that safe haven for the girls. And within the school, we've got hygiene programs, all kinds of things for women, so they feel comfortable and safe at school.
Wow, that's so amazing. I want to move on to some other things that you're doing here too, but I was just curious, as far as your work in Kenya, is there a story that sticks out to you that has really made an impact on your life? Specifically, there's a student there or something that happened that's really kind of left an impression on you, has changed your life. I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So there's not really one. Well, there's one student, and it actually came from our trip in Ghana, and it was before Kenya, but it was one of our first kind of look at where we could work in Africa. And I'll never forget, Stu and I we're going to try and find somewhere for dinner one night. So we were walking down the street, and actually we were pretty emotional and upset because we had just been in a pretty horrific car accident like 2 hours before, and saw someone get killed right in front of us. Like, he hit our windshield, and that was crazy.
Whoa.
It was really, really, yeah. But basically our car driver was driving, and it was like one of those, where they put everyone in a van and there's like 10 people. So we were at the back, and we were driving down this road, how they swerve along, and we're going, and all of a sudden this gentleman came out on his bike, and our driver didn't see him and hit him, and he hit our windshield, flew over the car, and when the truck came by, it was, oh man, and then of course everyone got out of the car, and it got crazy. And so we had just lived through that, and it was crazy. So we were walking up the street, and we're still like upset, and like it just, living through something like that. And thankfully we were,
I can't imagine
somebody like actually, all that happened, it was horrific. So we were walking down trying to get somewhere to eat. And then, when you're places and people trying to sell you things, and you're like, oh, no, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you. But there was this one little boy, and his name was King William, and he kept coming up to us, and he was like, no, I want to sell you bracelets, like 3 bracelets for $2. And we're like, no, thank you. No, thank you. But he was so persistent. And then finally Stu's like, we love a good deal. What's your deal? And he said, I'll make 5 bracelets for the price of 2. And we're like, sure. We're like, okay. And then he's like, I can put your name on them. Like, what would you like? And so we said at that time, Village Impact was known as World Teacher Aid. So we had WTA put on them. They're like, and we said to King William, but we're leaving like right now. Or not right now, like in an hour, do you have enough time? And he was like, yes, I have enough time. Don't worry. And he sat down on the edge of the road. I'll never forget. He just plopped himself down on the edge of the road, and we're sitting at this cafe watching him, and he's wrapping and wrapping and racking these bracelets all around. And then we went out to talk to him, and we just started saying, like, do you go to school? And he's like, well, no, it's my sister's turn to go to school now because my family doesn't have enough money to send us all to school. And then we're like, well, how much is school? And he said $25 for the year. And we're like, wow. And then he pulls out his report card. Like, he actually pulls out his report card. I mean, what kids do you know? Not my kids that travel around with a report card in their bag. And we looked at his report card, and he had like almost a straight A average, and then he was away some of the days, and it was only like 2 or 3. And he's like, oh, I regret those days, but I had to help with my dad and a few other things. And we're like, oh, wow. And then he's still making the bracelets. And we said to him, well, how about this? We'll give you money for school. And if we give you money for school, you have to send us your next report card and tell us what you're doing, and then we'll contribute a little more. And so that was that. He made these amazing bracelets. We said our goodbyes, and we're like, well, I don't know if I'll ever hear from him again. And then 3 months later, I'm still teaching at that point, and I get a call from Stu. And that time I didn't have an iPhone, really dating.
Wow.
No iPhone, right? No phone. He calls at the office, and I call him back up, maybe resets break. And he's like, you'll never guess what? We've got a package. And I'm like, no way. I'm like, open it, because I have no patience in like waiting to get it. So he opened the package, and in this package was King William's report card.
Oh my God.
But the most amazing thing was, it wasn't only his report card. In the package was a whole bunch of other merchandise that he had branded under World Teacher Aid. So he made a tie.
Oh my gosh.
He made a tie with Mr. Stu. And then the best part was, inside the packages, he had his email and like a little promotional line, and all beautifully wrapped.
Oh my God.
So it's like crazy, right? It just, and we were like blown away. So then we helped him through the rest of the school that he did. But the most special part was that he, now fast forward to today, he's made bracelets for us for various fundraisers. I mean, Russell had his event. We've made, I think he's 15,000 bracelets.
Oh my God.
He now hires his brother to help him when we have a job, or somebody in his community. And for me, it's that story just shows the power of persistence, because he never ever stopped bugging us to do.
Oh, this is amazing.
But just the creativity behind that, right? You just never know who you're going to meet or what impact they can have. And who's to say that, King William that we met when he was a little boy is now an adult and a man and married. But like, that's, it's one visit and 1 second. And, we work together, and he's made thousands of bracelets. And that was probably one of the biggest earlier ones.
That's so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that. We're an ecom platform, and I was thinking, man, I got to connect with this guy so he can sell product, because I'm actually, my mom's Brazilian, and so I lived in Brazil when I was a kid, and
yeah,
I don't think it's a different world than Africa, but it always strikes me how entrepreneurial the people down there are, and how willing they are to work hard. So yeah, I think there's that same connection with Africa there. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that story. Let's go on here, because I know you do a lot more than Village Impact, but I don't know how you do it, Amy. But I just want to know, like, besides Village Impact, you do Lady Strength. You mentioned you've written a book. You want to talk to us a little bit about that end of your business as well, and how you got started with it?
I'm very multi-passionate. So yeah, the nonprofit is exactly one of my ventures that I'm truly, honored to lead. And I love the team and the team we've created there. But there's really one kind of root to everything that I do. And the kind of whole passion or root behind it is travel. I've loved traveling since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up in the UK. I know I don't sound like it. I wish I still love it.
Oh,
I grew up when I was 10, but my family always, we gave back growing up. We had strangers over for dinner because they had nowhere to go. Like we were at soup kitchens, and then we'd travel in Europe a lot. So I kind of grew up traveling and I knew that I wanted to do it. So even in university, when I did my master's, I didn't want to stay in Ontario. I'm like, I need to go somewhere else. So I ended up living in Australia for a year and a half. I taught English overseas at various international language schools, became directors of those schools. But the underlying theme to everything that I've done is travel. And so with my Lady Strength stuff that I run, those are retreats, and oftentimes they're international and they have the travel aspect to them. So I always, for me, stick to those things that light me up. So you'll notice in my charity, I mean, it's travel, it's going to Kenya, it's somewhere else. Lady Strength is all about adventure retreats, getting out of
sensing a theme.
Definite theme. Like we did a motorcycle run with another company and I added something onto it, but we did a motorcycle run where I rode motorcycles through the desert in Morocco for 7 days and didn't have any places to stay, but we just had to find somewhere to stay every night. So I do these crazy adventure things, but again, it's all to travel. And then my latest Airbnb thing is the newest thing that I've kind of ventured into. Real estate has always been a part of our plan as a couple and as a family. So that's part of our portfolio, if you will. But these Airbnb experiences are again related to travel, but then also create an experience. So for me, it's all about travel, but then it's also about creating these unforgettable experiences that I can give to families or customers or whoever it is that they'll remember, right? Because money's great, but we remember those things we do together. We remember the things we do, the experiences we have as a family, with our staff, with our team, whoever it may be. And to me, that's the most important part of everything as well.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I love to travel as well. Amazing that you've been able to make this passion into something that, you know, not only helps provide for your family, but helps other people discover their passions. I guess that would be my next question. You know, a lot of people, I feel, at least, I know for me it was hard. How do you discover your passion? Because it sounds like for you it's pretty innate. Like you kind of discovered it when you're younger. But what about those of us who are adults now and we may be just working a job that we don't like, or our life situation is great? What are some strategies that we can use to find our passion?
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say, like, no one's passion is like too big or too small, and we all have different passions. And not every passion is necessarily, maybe a money-making activity. It's just something that you really love to do, because when you're really and truly doing something you're passionate about, you're so busy thinking about what's possible that you don't think about things that you can't do, right? Because you're too excited about thinking all the things that you can do. So I think when it comes to passion, it's like there's one thing you can do that I write about in the book that talks about this thing called a passion timeline. And it's so simple, and it's not rocket science, but at the same time, it's taking that time to do it. So in a sense, it's just drawing a straight line and then going up in increments of 10 and looking back through your life. Like, what did you do in your 30s? What did you do in your 20s? What did you do when you were a teenager? And revisiting those times in your life and thinking about it. Because I think as parents, you said you have 3 kids, I have 2 kids. It gets busy, right? With all the things we do as being a parent figure running our businesses, that sometimes we forget or we don't dive into the things that we love to do. So definitely going back and looking at what you used to do. And then if nothing kind of sounds exciting for you anymore, that's totally okay. Then I would suggest diving into something completely brand new, or something maybe, say you've thought about art, well, then look for an art class. But you have to take action. It's like we said at the beginning of the call, you have to move forward in something, because the passion isn't going to knock on your door and like, here you go. You've got to kind of work towards it or follow those breadcrumbs. And then you have to do you, if you would, because we talk about travel. Like, my husband doesn't like traveling as much as I do. And that's okay. Like, it's good for both to have different passions that we love. And I think that's the best part of our relationship, is that he knows how, knows things that I love. And, I'll go on a trip by myself. I'll go on a trip with friends. We'll do family trips. But he always makes sure, and I make sure, that that bucket is full in some capacity of what I'm trying to do. So I don't think if you're married, you have to have the same passions. I think it's almost unhealthy to have all the same passions. You got to have your different one. But you've got to take the time to make time for it on your calendar, and put it on there. So I would say going back in your past and looking at things that you used to do, or grabbing a friend and doing something that, you thought about but haven't quite got to, or trying something completely brand new that's out of your comfort zone and out of something of the ordinary that you usually do.
Yeah, I love that. In fact, something you said really stuck out to me, because I'll say, at least for me, I always tie like, oh, I have to tie my passion to somehow making money, like a job. But I think you hit on something there where you can still have a passion for something that doesn't bring in any money. It just brings joy. And you can have a job that kind of funds your life. But I think some people kind of steer away from their passions because of that. I'll speak for myself. That's kind of what mine was, Like, I look back at myself, volleyball was a huge passion of mine. And, I just recently, I'm actually going to play in a tournament after 25 years now. Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'm super excited about it, but I feel like a lot of times I neglected that because I was like, I need to find a passion that's going to pay the bills. But it's finding that time to find the passions that maybe don't pay the bills. And just a follow up on that, I think of the women in my life, and it seems like there's a lot to balance. Sometimes, and it's men as well, but you brought up the fact of trying to juggle motherhood, and you have all these things going. Yeah. I'm just curious if you find that for women especially, if it's harder for them to give themselves permission to pursue those passions because they're focused on their kids or, their careers or whatever. I wonder if there's a dynamic there that you've discovered with women and their passions.
Yeah, for sure. That's a common thing all the time. And what I talk to in that is that, first of all, I think when you're doing something you're passionate about, or taking time to do volleyball or dance, whatever it may be for yourself, when you're doing that, that brings out the best version of yourself, right? So when I think about how I want to show up for my kids, it's, it's important to me that they see me enjoying things. They see me having my own passion. They see mom having fun doing what she loves, because, I want to show my children what's possible for their life by them watching me live mine. And if I'm going to stand up as a parent and say, make sure you take time for yourself, follow your dreams, and do all these things. As a mom, it's my responsibility to model that for my daughter. I have, and my son, to show my daughter that I really don't love public speaking. I get scared out of my mind, and it's terrifying. But I do it because, it's not only pushing myself, but I know it can open up the door for opportunities for the charity, and it can make a difference. And and I was out on the weekend with my girlfriends, and my daughter was like, Mom, don't go. And I'm like, well, this is Mom's time. I'm going to go out with my friends. Or I write about this in my book, where I had a great conversation with my daughter 4 years ago. And I forget, I was putting her to bed. And that morning I was leaving on a flight to go speak at my friend Amy's event. And then I was going on to do an RV trip adventure that I organized with a bunch of women entrepreneurs for a mastermind RV trip. And so would have been gone, I think it was gone 12 days or something like that. And I remember my daughter saying to me, I don't want you to go. And she was in tears. And was there mom guilt? Absolutely. Was I feeling really bad? Yes, I was. But I said to her, Marla, you really love riding. She's a huge equestrian rider, does jumps, all kinds of stuff. I'm like, you really love riding. And would it be fair for me to ask you not to go to riding? And she's kind of like, well, no, I really love it, Mom. I said, well, I really love traveling and seeing my friends. So is it fair for you to ask me to not do something that I really love? And she's like, well, no. I'm so. Yeah. But I think it's just showing up for our kids in that way, and in little ways. It doesn't have to mean that if you're not comfortable going away for 2 weeks, totally fine. But then I think there's time for you to go out and play volleyball, or go with your girlfriends for a drink, because we've got to show them what's possible, right? As parents, I think that's partly our job to do that.
Wow, that was amazing. I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think it's that guilt that keeps us from doing it. I mean, it's not just women, of course, but men. But yeah, that's awesome. So just real quick before we wrap up, you have a lot going on. Truthfully, I have no idea how you do it all. I'm running a business.
Sorry to interrupt. I got to say one more thing about that, because
okay,
then get stuck too. There is nothing wrong with getting help. And I think a lot of women get stuck, and men, in that where I have to do everything. And I will be the first to advocate to get help. And like Stu and I are very fortunate to have help. Like I do have help with laundry and some meals and things like that, or cooking or cleaning. Like getting help with that, those things does not make you any less of a parent to get help. And then allows you more present time with your kids. And I struggled for a while when we first had help. And I found that as soon as we had a little bit of help with those other things, I became a more fully present parent, because I'm not worrying about the other things. I can focus on those things. So if you're looking at getting help, you can always start small, in an hour a week of having somebody come in and clean, or whatever it is to you, to give them that time. But there's also nothing wrong. And that's how we do things, is I'm very fortunate. I recognize that, but to have people around that can help. But I'm still pick up my kids every day after school and do all those things. But there's just nothing wrong with that too. And I do think that's where some people get stuck as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks for that tip. So yeah, you balance so much. Would you mind sharing just a few strategies that you found helpful to help you balance just this awesome life that you've created for yourself, doing a charity, businesses, motherhood? Love to hear some of the strategies that you use to balance all that.
So one would be like, we just had to get help, because there's nothing wrong with help. My second thing is just knowing that I think for us anyway, we've recognized that life comes in different flows and different seasons. So for example, my husband, when he launches his membership site course every year, we know that's going to be a busy time. So it's being okay with that as a busy month or a busy season, and not knowing that everything always has to work out perfect. It's like, that's a busy time. We know, we're prepared for it. This is what it's going to look like. The other thing I think is finding time that works for you to, if you're married, to discuss things that's happening in your household. So for example, we walk our kids to school every day. They were offered a bus, but we turned the bus down, and we walk every day. We tell ourselves we're the walking family. I think we're the only family.
Uphill both ways, right?
Yeah, walkways. And then, but we use that time on the way back as a couple to go over the day. So that's like, there's no distractions. It's 20 minutes. It's like a great kind of check-in of what's happening that day. So I think finding a spot that works for you and your family, where you can have that check-in with your partner on like what's happening that day. So you're not trying to fit it all in or doing it over dinner. It's like that 20 minutes of space. The other thing I would say is, nothing I'd say. I mean, we're big planners. I'm just looking at my planning that I have to the right at the office here. Like, we plan probably a year and a half out. And I know that sounds crazy to some people.
No, that's awesome.
It makes me feel good. And like for us, we're very intentional about our calendars and making sure that we put on not the priorities of our business, but the priorities for us as a family and individually what we want. So when we plan, we put all of our priorities as a family and individual, Sue and I, on the calendar first. And then we put the business stuff on after. And then that way the business isn't running the calendar. Our lives are kind of like the top of the calendar, if that makes sense. So for us, we sit down every year to do kind of the big rocks on the calendar. But I think that's another thing, is just making sure you're intentional and putting it on your calendar, because man, we know like running businesses, the calendar can get chewed up pretty quickly. And if you're not careful,
for sure,
it's full of stuff that you don't want to do. So setting those boundaries and then making sure that you plan ahead.
Awesome. Okay. Last question, Amy. What does building a legacy look like for you?
Yeah. So, it's funny. I find a lot of people get caught up in that it's a big word. And at the end of the day, like it is a big word or a big thing. But legacy for me is not just one thing. It's an accumulation of our lifetime. Like it's an accumulation of the kind activities that we do every day, the generosity that we have, that is our legacy that we leave behind. Like naming a school or a building is amazing, wonderful. But at the same time, all the little acts that we do every single day add up to our legacy. To me, that's what legacy is. It's saying please and thank you at Tim Hortons or Starbucks and holding a door open for somebody. It's sharing about a nonprofit or whatever it may be. But all these little acts of kindness are still important. And that is what creates our legacy every day.
Oh, that was beautiful. Yeah, the little things, right? Well, listen, Amy, thank you so much. Where can people find out more about your charities, your businesses? Go ahead and share with us where we can learn more about you.
So if you just go to amymclaren.com, that has mostly everything that I do on there.
Awesome. And we'll put it in the description too.
Yeah, and then I'm pretty active on Instagram more than Facebook, but that's Amy McLaren.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Amy, for sharing your story with us. And guys, don't forget to like and subscribe to Ecom Life. Until next time, we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to the Ecom Life podcast. Ecom Life podcast is produced by Quadra. Monetize your creativity with Quadra, an e-commerce platform created by sellers for sellers. To learn more, visit goquadra.com. We appreciate your time and hope today's episode has enriched your understanding of the online business world. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay up to date with the latest trends, strategies, and success stories, please consider subscribing to the podcast and following us on social media at Ecom Life Podcast.